It was a typical Tuesday morning in Chicago, the city's bustling streets, filled with the hum of traffic and the rush of pedestrians going about their daily routines. Ibrahim Traoré, a former military officer turned successful tech entrepreneur, was sitting at his desk in his sleek downtown office, reviewing his latest business venture. His company, a cutting-edge cybersecurity firm, had earned him respect and wealth, but it was his family that grounded him. His wife, Amina, and their 8-year-old son, Malik, were the cornerstones of his world. But that morning, the tranquility shattered in an instant. A frantic call from Amina sent Ibrahim's world spiraling into chaos. Malik had been kidnapped. The details were hazy at first, but the phone call was enough. The sound of Amina's voice trembling with fear was a haunting echo that would stay with Ibrahim for the rest of his life. It was every parent's nightmare. His child had been taken from him, and no one knew where he was. Amina was in hysterics, her voice barely audible through the panic, but she managed to tell Ibrahim that Malik had been taken right from their home. The kidnapper had left behind a chilling message, but nothing more. Ibrahim's military training kicked in immediately. Where others would panic, he stayed calm. His mind raced through every scenario, every possibility. He could have immediately gone to the police, but he didn't. The authorities would be involved eventually, of course, but he knew that in this moment, speed and precision were crucial. His son's life depended on how he acted in the coming hours. Ibrahim wasn't the type to make impulsive decisions. He was methodical, tactical, and always 5 steps ahead of his adversaries. In the silence of his office, he took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment to center himself. When he opened them again, he had made up his mind. There would be no panicked media frenzy. There would be no wild police chase across the city streets. Ibrahim had built a reputation as someone who dealt with challenges head-on, but this was a fight like no other, a battle that would require more than just physical strength. It would take strategy, secrecy, and a network of people who owed him favors. Ibrahim reached for his phone, but instead of dialing 911, he made a call to someone from his past, someone who still operated in the shadows. Malik was not just his son, he was the future, the legacy, and no one, not even the criminals who dared to cross him, would take him away without facing the consequences. As the minutes ticked by, Ibrahim's mind was already working out the blueprint for what was to come. The clock was ticking, and every second wasted could mean a life lost. But Ibrahim wasn't worried. He had prepared for moments like this. He'd anticipated the possibility of something terrible happening to his family, and now he was ready to execute a plan so secretive that even the FBI would be left in the dark. The only question that remained was whether this quiet, calculated man could pull off the impossible, and if he could, how far was he willing to go? Ibrahim's phone rang, and he answered immediately. "It's time," he said simply. His voice was steady, unwavering, no panic, no distress. He didn't need to explain the situation. The person on the other end, a former colleague from his military days, understood exactly what Ibrahim needed. Within minutes, Ibrahim had assembled a network of experts, hackers, ex-special forces operatives, investigators, and even a few people who knew the criminal underworld of Chicago like the back of their hand. These weren't the usual authorities. They were a team who operated in the shadows, always on the periphery, always under the radar. Ibrahim's mind raced through the possibilities. He knew the city's landscape, the neighborhoods, the alleyways, and the hidden places where criminal organizations often hid. But this wasn't just about finding his son, it was about retrieving him, without alerting the kidnappers that they were being hunted. Ibrahim's strategy was built on 2 pillars, secrecy and precision. He would need to ensure that no one knew who was after them, especially the kidnappers. The police could be useful later, but in the beginning, Ibrahim knew he had to work under the radar. The network Ibrahim created was vast, each person skilled in a specific area. First, there was Ethan, a former cyber intelligence officer, who could hack into any system, and who had a knack for finding hidden digital traces. Then there was Carla, a former FBI agent turned private investigator, with a deep understanding of criminal psychology. She would provide insights into the mind of the kidnapper, and predict their next moves. And then of course, there was Marcus, the man Ibrahim trusted to take care of the more physical aspects of the operation. Marcus had worked with Ibrahim in the past, and together, they had pulled off more covert missions than either cared to count. Ibrahim briefed them in detail. He laid out the kidnappers' likely motives: ransom, retaliation, or something more sinister. However, Ibrahim's instinct told him that this wasn't just an ordinary kidnapping. The message left behind, cryptic and chilling, pointed to something bigger. These weren't random criminals. Whoever had taken Malik was part of something larger, something Ibrahim had yet to uncover. As the team prepared to go to work, Ibrahim knew one thing for certain: the media would soon catch wind of the kidnapping. He had to move fast. As the sun began to set over Chicago, Ibrahim moved like a shadow, blending into the night, his every move calculated and silent. The FBI and local authorities would soon catch up, but by then, it might be too late. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, encrypted messages, and discreet meetings. Ibrahim's mind was on overdrive as he orchestrated the next steps of his mission. Every detail, every action needed to be precise. His son's life was on the line, and there was no room for error. He had to keep his calm, control the narrative, and maintain the upper hand. His team, spread out across the city, was ready. They were the ones who would help him move undetected, who would gather the information and uncover the paths that led to his son. As night fell, Ibrahim sat in his office, staring at the digital map of Chicago on his laptop screen. Red markers pinpointed locations across the city where his team had gathered intel, each one more promising than the last. Ethan, the cyber intelligence officer, had already cracked into the kidnappers' communications network. It was a long shot, but he'd managed to find traces of their digital footprint. They had been careless in one regard: they didn't realize that their encrypted messages could be intercepted. "What do we have?" Ibrahim asked, his voice calm but firm. Ethan's face flickered on the screen. "We've traced the messages to a series of locations in the South Side. They're using payphones, but I've pinpointed a few addresses. We have a solid lead." Ibrahim's eyes narrowed. The South Side wasn't just a rough part of Chicago. It was a place riddled with gangs, criminal enterprises, and murky alliances. This wasn't just about rescuing his son, it was about dismantling an entire operation. He had always known that wealth and power attracted enemies, but he had never expected his family to become a pawn in such a larger game. Ibrahim knew that the kidnappers were hiding Malik somewhere, using a series of safe houses to avoid detection. They would never keep him in one place for long. But what puzzled Ibrahim was why the criminals hadn't contacted him for ransom yet. It wasn't about the money, it was something else, and Ibrahim was going to find out what. He turned to Carla, the former FBI agent. "What do you make of this?" Carla studied the data on her tablet, running through possible scenarios. "This feels personal, Ibrahim. Whoever is behind this knows you. This isn't just about money or leverage. Whoever's behind this has a history with you, whether you know it or not." Ibrahim's mind raced. He hadn't made many enemies in the criminal underworld, but there were a few. People who might have seen his success as a threat. People who might have resented his rise from military officer to tech mogul. But who would target his son, who would use an innocent child as leverage? Before he could form any conclusions, Marcus called in with an update. "I've scoped out the area around the first location," Marcus said. "It's crawling with people, but it's quiet. Too quiet. We'll need to move fast. I recommend we wait until the dead of night to make a move." Ibrahim paused for a moment, thinking through his options. Waiting was risky, but rushing in without proper intel was even riskier. He made his decision. "Go in tonight," Ibrahim instructed. "We'll gather what we can, but remember, no one makes contact with the kidnappers unless we have Malik in hand. Stay in the shadows." As the team readied themselves for the covert operation, Ibrahim sat back and reflected. The city of Chicago, with its towering buildings and hidden alleyways, had always been a place of opportunity, but tonight, it felt more like a labyrinth, a maze of shadows and danger, with his son somewhere in the middle. With every moment that passed, Ibrahim could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier. Time was slipping through his fingers, but he couldn't afford to let the pressure dictate his actions. His calculated approach would be his greatest asset, but even the most carefully laid plans had a way of being tested in ways he couldn't predict. The kidnappers might not realize it yet, but they had awakened a force far greater than they could have imagined. By midnight, the city was cloaked in darkness, its streets eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of distant traffic. Ibrahim and his team were positioned in various corners of the south side, blending into the night like shadows. Marcus and a few other operatives had positioned themselves at key vantage points around the first location, an old decrepit warehouse at the edge of a forgotten industrial district. Ethan, in a safe house a few blocks away, continued his work hacking into surveillance systems to provide live feeds of the area. Ibrahim's heart beat steadily, though his mind was anything but calm. He had done operations before, but never with this level of personal involvement. Never with his son at the center of it all. Malik's face kept flashing in his mind, the innocent smile, the untainted joy of childhood. Ibrahim had seen the world's darkest corners as a military officer, but he had never imagined that someone would use his own child as leverage. Whoever had taken Malik was not just a criminal, they were a mastermind, someone who knew exactly how to break a man like Ibrahim. Anything on the surveillance? Ibrahim asked, his voice low as he stood in the shadows, waiting for Marcus's next move. Ethan's voice crackled through his earpiece. Nothing yet, but we're seeing movement. There's a car parked outside the warehouse, a black van, no plates. Whoever's inside is trying to stay off the grid. Ibrahim's mind worked quickly. The van could be a decoy, or it could be where Malik was being held. There was no time to waste, but Ibrahim knew he had to keep his team in check. Rushing in blindly could lead to disaster. Hold position for now, Ibrahim instructed. We need more intel, don't move until we're sure. The team stayed silent, watching, waiting. The minutes stretched on like hours. Ibrahim's mind kept circling back to the bigger picture. He had known his life would take unpredictable turns after transitioning from the military to business. But this was personal. These kidnappers weren't after money, they were trying to make a statement. The silence in the air felt suffocating, and Ibrahim hated it. In the past, he had thrived on the adrenaline of danger, but this was different. His son was the prize, and it was only a matter of time before the kidnappers realized that Ibrahim wouldn't back down. Then, out of the stillness, came a low, tense voice from Carla. I think I've got something, she said. There's a name in the digital chatter Ethan uncovered. It's a criminal syndicate operating out of the south side. They've been trafficking kids for ransom, but they've never targeted someone with your profile before. They're bold, but this feels like it's more than just a ransom operation. Ibrahim's pulse quickened. This wasn't just random criminals looking to make money. This was organized, methodical, and deeply personal. The idea that a criminal syndicate had targeted his son sent a jolt of cold fury through him. He had underestimated the enemy. But now, with this new information, he had a better understanding of who he was up against. I want everything on this syndicate, Ibrahim ordered. Find out where they operate, who's running them, and what their next move is. As he spoke, Marcus whispered into his earpiece. We've got a visual on the warehouse. There are 2 men outside, but we haven't spotted any kids. Hold your positions, don't make contact yet, Ibrahim replied. His voice was sharp with command. We're not here to start a fight, we're here to take back Malik. The team continued to monitor the location as the tension in the air thickened. Hours passed without any sign of movement. Ibrahim's patience, however, remained unshaken. He knew that every minute spent waiting could be critical, but he also understood the importance of precision. Every decision had to be calculated. One wrong move, one misstep, could mean losing Malik forever. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that a breakthrough came. Ethan, still working from his location, managed to intercept a message from the kidnappers. It wasn't a demand for ransom, as Ibrahim had expected. It was a warning: stay out of this, or your son will be the price you pay. Ibrahim's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about ransom, this was a warning to him specifically. The kidnappers knew who he was. They knew the risks they were taking by targeting him, and they were trying to intimidate him into backing off. Ibrahim took a deep breath, the anger in his chest building. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. They thought they could threaten him into submission, but they had underestimated him. I've had enough of this, Ibrahim said, his voice quiet but filled with deadly resolve. We move in now, no more waiting, this ends tonight. The entire team sprang into action, moving with practiced precision. Ibrahim knew they were close. so close to finding his son, and when they did, he would make sure that the kidnappers would regret ever crossing him. The first streaks of dawn began to break over Chicago, casting a faint, pale light across the city. The stillness of the early morning was deceptive, masking the intense anticipation building among Ibrahim and his team. They were positioned outside the warehouse now, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. Ibrahim's fingers gripped his phone tightly as he received the final update from Ethan. "I've traced the signal to a secured room inside the warehouse. It's heavily guarded, but we've got a visual on Malik. He's in there, but they've moved him. He's no longer alone." Ibrahim's heart skipped. His son was so close. Yet the fact that they had moved Malik, and the mention of others being with him, only intensified the danger. This was no longer just about a father rescuing his child. It had escalated into a battle to dismantle a criminal operation and protect his family from a future of threats. "I want everyone in position," Ibrahim said, his voice steady and firm, like the officer he once was. "We go in fast, we go in quiet, no one dies today." The team moved like shadows, disappearing into the industrial landscape, blending into the city's gritty backdrop. Marcus, the physical tactician of the group, led the charge, his specialized team following closely behind. Ibrahim was at the rear, keeping his head down and eyes sharp, directing the movements through a series of subtle hand signals. They reached the side entrance of the warehouse, a rusted metal door, hidden behind old crates and piles of discarded junk. The perfect cover. Ethan's voice crackled over Ibrahim's earpiece. "I've hacked the security system. You're clear to move. No cameras, no alarms. You've got 5 minutes before the next patrol rounds the corner." The countdown was on. With a nod, Ibrahim signaled the team to breach the door. The metal gave way with ease, the hinges creaking under pressure. The team moved inside, immediately fanning out to secure the area. Ibrahim's breath was steady, but his mind was racing. He had been in high-stakes situations before, but never with the life of his son at the center of it all. This was personal, and no one, not even the criminals in the shadows, would take Malik away from him. They moved through the warehouse with a precise, calculated method, the footsteps of the operatives silent, as they cleared rooms. Everything was still, no one expected them, not yet. Then they found it, the secured room. Behind the heavy steel door was Malik. He was sitting on the floor, bruised but alive. His eyes were wide with fear, but the moment he saw Ibrahim, his face lit up with recognition, relief flooding his small features. "Dad!" Malik cried, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and joy. The sight of his son was all it took for Ibrahim's emotions to surge. His heart broke at the sight of Malik's disheveled state, but there was no time for tears. "Stay calm, son," Ibrahim said, his voice soft but commanding. He rushed to Malik's side, kneeling beside him, and gently pulling him into a hug. "We're getting you out of here." As he embraced his son, Ibrahim's mind never stopped working. He knew the kidnappers would be coming soon. They had to move quickly, but just as Ibrahim was about to signal the team to move out, he heard footsteps approaching, too close. Without hesitation, Marcus and the others took positions, guns drawn, prepared for a confrontation. Ibrahim stood protectively in front of Malik, his eyes scanning the dark hallway leading to the room. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then the door burst open, and in rushed 2 armed men, their faces hidden behind masks. They moved to take Malik back, but they never saw what hit them. In a flash, Marcus and his team were on them, disarming them with swift, precise moves. The criminals tried to fight back, but it was no use. The team was trained for situations like this, and Ibrahim was in full control. The kidnappers, now restrained, were left trembling on the cold concrete floor. Their plans had fallen apart in an instant. Ibrahim's eyes met theirs, and the look in his gaze was chilling. "You made a grave mistake. You thought you could break me. You were wrong." As the authorities were called in, and the criminals were taken into custody, Ibrahim stood with Malik, his son safe in his arms. The job was far from over, but the first part of the mission had been completed. Malik was safe, and for Ibrahim, that was all that mattered. The news broke quickly. The city of Chicago buzzed with reports of a high-profile kidnapping, but the twist came when the media discovered the truth. It wasn't the police, but a quiet, methodical man, Ibrahim Traoré, who had orchestrated the rescue. His tactics were so secretive, so precise, that even the FBI was left in the dark. The authorities had been in the background, but it was Ibrahim's network, his silent strategy, that had led to Malik's safe return. The nation was stunned by the quiet heroism of Ibrahim Traoré. He had saved his son, not with brute force, but with a calculated mind and unshakable resolve. As the media praised his efforts, Ibrahim's only focus remained on one thing: getting his family back to safety, where they belonged. His calculated approach had stunned the nation, but for Ibrahim, the real victory was in the moments he spent holding Malik, knowing he had done whatever it took to protect his family.